We're going to take a look at NASA blunders, but we're going to set the ground, we're going to lay the foundation right now. This is Dr. Thomas Chamberlain. He was a former president of the University of Wisconsin and the first head of the geology department at the University of Chicago. And he had this really famous paper which warned researchers not to let one hypothesis dominate their thinking. Instead they should always have or seek multiple working hypotheses. Therefore, they could sharpen their analytical skills and develop thoroughness and reduce bias and think independently. He said otherwise they just simply memorize and conform. And that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing a lot of memorizing and conforming because there's only one theory that's allowed in the classroom. I've gone through the textbooks, and it's a blind chance theory of the past. A blind chance perspective of the past. That's like thinking this building got put together by blind chance. That's absurd, right? How much more absurd to think our bodies got put together by chance. And yet that's the only view they get in the textbook. It's the Big Bang and evolution. And the Big Bang is falling apart. Just look at some of their research journals, or their journals. This is from cosmologystatement.org. The Big Bang relies on a growing number of hypothetical entities, things that have never been observed. Inflation, dark matter, and dark energy. Dark matter and dark energy, by the way, are 96% of the universe, according to them. And if your theory can only explain 4% of what we see, it's time for a new theory. And it says, today virtually all financial and experimental resources in cosmology are devoted to the Big Bang studies, self-sustaining irrespective of the scientific validity of the theory. So it's got problems. And then this one, they tried to predict what they'd find with the Hubble Deep Field image. They thought they'd be looking so far back that they would see infant galaxies being formed. And Bob Enyart, he says, no, we haven't been here millions of years. I know God created us sooner than that. And he said, you're going to find mature galaxies way out there. And they were stunned. Yeah, crises in the cosmos. Cosmic conundrum. Youthful galaxies from the early universe appear already to be chock full of old stars. That's like going to a nursery at the hospital and finding a senior citizen there. They just can't explain it with their blind chance perspective. And then look at this. This is from the James Webb, I believe. And all those lights, almost all of them, those are galaxies, not stars. Those are galaxies. And it's getting to be such a laughingstock that the Big Bang is, that Jason Lisle, he's an astronomer, he predicted that their predictions are wrong. And once they are wrong, he predicted that they're going to say that galaxies formed earlier than expected. And he was right both times. It says, Webb discovers that galaxies formed much earlier than previously thought. Galaxies started forming much earlier than many astronomers previously thought. So he was right. He was right that they were wrong, and he was right at what they said once they realized it. And so the James Webb Space Telescope first glimpse of early galaxy could break cosmology. So they're in trouble. It says everyone was freaking out at what they saw. In the weeks and months following the James Webb Space Telescope's finding of surprisingly mature early galaxies, blindsided theorists and observers alike have been scrambling to explain them. At stake is nothing less than our very understanding of how the orderly universe we know emerged from primordial chaos. Yeah, that's right. It's in trouble. I'm saying that it didn't emerge from primordial chaos. God created it. It was designed. It's clearly designed. Maybe there's something happening in the early universe that means it's easier for some galaxies to form stars. And then this is from Space News. Webb spots super old massive galaxies that shouldn't exist because their blind chance perspective of the past is wrong. They're wrong all the time when they make predictions, and the creationists are right almost every time. It's bananas, is what they say. These galaxies should not have had time to form. We still didn't expect James Webb to see such mature galaxies. Okay, well, tonight we're going to take a look at the Hydroplate Theory. And we had our very first Hydroplate conference last spring, and you can see these talks on hydroplate.org or else on YouTube or on Rumble. And we had, let's see, there was 13 talks, and 3 of them were given by PhD scientists, and 1 of them worked at the U.S. Air Force Academy. So we've got some big hitters that are pounding this hydroplate drum, and it's just stunning that it's not being, they don't even want to look at it. The science director at the high school, the science department at the college, the science at the community college, they don't even want to see it. And that's just stunning to me. It's appalling, I think. That's not science. And what I learned through that whole process is educators are not, or teachers are not educators. They're bureaucrats. They're going to teach whatever the state wants them to teach, even if it's wrong. And I think that we should double check that. I don't think taxpayers would be happy about that. But if you can only see one of the talks in the Hydroplate conference, check out the comet talk. This is by Kevin Lee at 22:15 and 31:45. He accurately predicts what they'd find in a comet and what asteroids would be made of. And he writes about this, and he was right both times. And NASA accidentally causes Dimorphos boulder swarm. Because he said, and this is his email that he sent to the Dr. Brownlee, he reminded him that he made accurate predictions on what he'd find in a comet. He said you'd find stuff from the Earth, not from the Oort cloud, and it was stuff from the Earth. And then he said that any attempt to deflect an asteroid has to be based on assumptions about the composition of the asteroid. The physics behind a chosen plan of one composition, solid rock, will work, but it'll fail if it's a bunch of boulders. And it failed because now there's a bunch of boulders. There's like 38 of them coming at us. When I gave this talk at St. Cloud State, after they stole 2 of our posters, and we kept on putting them back up, but this is, again, it's on our YouTube channel, and I dealt with the hydroplate. In June, somebody flew me down to Houston then, too, to give the hydroplate talk. Does anybody not know what the hydroplate is? Anybody? Okay, all right, we're going to do a quick overview. And we're going to show you this video, and then we're going to make it make sense, all right?
So let me know what you think.
This is the most insane space news in a really long time. This asteroid, called Bennu, is 63 million kilometers away. That's 160 times farther than the moon is. Over the last few years, this spacecraft called OSIRIS-REx traveled all the way there, touched its surface, grabbed a sample, and brought it all the way back to Earth. And what they found in that sample is insane. It's rich in carbon, nitrogen, and organic compounds, all of which are essential to life as we know it, but we've seen that before. The asteroid is also covered in a mineral called serpentine, which looks like this. And these samples look just like the type of rock that we find here in mid-ocean ridges. This is where the stuff from the mantle of the Earth comes up and touches the water. It's underwater. Scientists think that this asteroid could be a chunk of an ancient small ocean world. This could be a piece of an old watery planet that's been traveling through space for billions of years, and we just took a sample of it.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
Wow. Oh my goodness.
We have a few minor tweaks for, first of all, that watery planet, let's call it Earth,
Oh,
as
yeah.
Kevin Lee likes to say. I wanted to get your reaction, Brian, because when I saw that, I'm like, wow, she works for Walt Brown and Real Science Radio in creating a short for us without us having to do all that production effort.
Yeah, she needs a raise, I think. Man.
Well, what everyone just saw on display was an example of a victim of the government schools, a victim of the deceptions and the errors that Brian has uncovered. That girl, to not even consider that this giant water planet is Earth, but that it's been traveling through space for millions of years, is because she has been victimized by exactly what Brian's been uncovering. And it's actually sad. It's sad to see, but it is instructive as to the work we have to do.
Yeah, it is sad. And so it's because she only had one theory. She's only been taught the blind chance theory of the past, and it doesn't make sense. She needs to see the other one. And to explain the hydroplate theory, why were they so excited that it came from a water planet, especially in the red part there where the water hit the mantle? That's where the elements were formed that they found in that asteroid. Okay, here's the hydroplate theory. This explains how you get stuff from the Earth way out there. And Walt Brown, he's got a PhD from MIT. He ran the Benet military lab. He's a really sharp dog, and he was the top dog there. And he came up with this theory. And the theory works. It just has one assumption. Because most theories, they look at what we have, we know what the effects are, and we try and guess what the cause was, and we never really know. This is different. He just sets up the cause with one assumption, and then he lets the laws of physics go at it, and it gives us the results that we have perfectly. So the one assumption was half of the ocean was inside the Earth at one time. Okay? Just half of the ocean's inside the Earth, 60 miles deep. So just think of the Earth as a big apple, The skin of the apple is 60 miles thick, made of granite. Then there's a layer of water about a mile thick, and underneath that is basalt, and they're touching at certain places, those he calls pillars. Okay, that's the one assumption. Okay, now let the laws of physics go at it. The moon's out there and it tugs on the earth. It makes high tide and low tide twice a day. Well, it's going to tug on the crust twice a day too. And back then the crust wasn't broken into plates like we have it today. And so it's going to stretch and compress, stretch and compress. It's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. The water wants to boil, but there's no room to expand, so it can't boil. And then at 705 degrees and 3200 psi, it becomes supercritical water, where it's not really water and it's not really steam, but whatever it is, it dissolves things like crazy. So now it's dissolving the granite above and the basalt below, and it's mixing it together to make these minerals like limestone and silicas and salts, and the crust is getting weaker and weaker, and it's getting hotter and hotter. And Walt Brown says that water was under 320,000 psi. So it's a time bomb. And when the crust cracks, it goes in two directions, and the water just erupts out of there. And the crust goes in two directions all the way around the earth and then comes back on itself. And that's how it could rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, and people say, well, if that happened, wouldn't it leave a mark? And the answer is yes, it did. That's the red part there. That's the mid-oceanic ridge. That red part it's a mid-oceanic ridge. It's 46,000 miles long. It goes through the bottom of the oceans and then comes back on itself. Okay, and so now the water's erupting out of there with tremendous force, and the two cliffs, you got two cliffs 60 miles high. And on Earth, you can only get a cliff 5 miles high because it's going to crush it below. So you got two cliffs 60 miles high crumbling into this hypersonic water. That's where we get the sediment for the layers of sedimentary rock all over the continents. And it gets wider and wider and wider. And pretty soon there's nothing pushing down on the mantle, and the mantle bulges. So now you got North America and South America sliding to the west, Africa and Europe sliding to the east, and they keep going until they meet resistance. And then they form the Rockies and the Andes and all the other mountain ranges, which are pretty well parallel to the mid-Atlantic ridge. And you'll notice the Rockies and the Andes, they're pretty much parallel. And the Rockies are twice as big as the Andes, and I think it's because we slid over the mid-oceanic ridge. Okay, so now you've got the big mountains. That's a big mass on a small base. They sink in, something sinks in, something's got to rise up. That's how you get the plateaus. And then all that mid-oceanic ridge stuff rising up, that rose up, something has to sink in. What sunk in? The Pacific Ocean. That's the Ring of Fire. That's why most of the trenches are in the Pacific Ocean. The deepest part in the ocean, almost 7 miles deep, the Mariana Trench, is in the Pacific, along with a lot of other ones. And there's like 40,000 volcanoes in the Pacific, and it's very different from the other oceans. Okay, so that's the big, and then we're going to skip some parts. I've got a playlist just for the hydroplate on my YouTube channel if you want more of the details. But for this talk, some of that stuff was going with such tremendous force that it broke through not only our atmosphere, the water shooting up with the rocks and the salts and the limestone, it also broke through out of our gravitational pull. Okay, and so now you got rocks and dry ice, that's frozen carbon dioxide, and mud, and what's been described as a dirty snowball in outer space? Does anybody know? What? Comets. That's right, comets. He says comets came from Earth. And that's why Kevin Lee was able to stand face to face with the NASA scientist, Dr. Brownlee, and say you're going to find stuff from the comet in the Earth, or stuff from the Earth in the comets. And he said, no, we're going to find stuff from the Oort cloud in the comets. And he was shocked to find stuff from the Earth. And that's where the asteroids came from, too. That's why it's 60 miles thick of granite, because the trans-Neptune objects, all that stuff. So that's the foundation for what we're going to see here. Does anybody have questions on that? It's kind of a lot in a little bit. Somebody flew me out to Houston to give this talk, and it answers all these seemingly unrelated topics. Everything from plateaus and trenches to submarine canyons and sedimentary rock, even the Grand Canyon, Arctic Circle, the Ice Age. We can explain that. Evolutionists can't. And once it started, why did it stop? Petrified trees, the moon, comets, asteroids, meteorites, Mars, fusing past iron. It's amazing theory. All these unanswered questions can be answered with the hydroplate. And the last one on Amazon went for $280. It used to be a $30 book. And the last one went for $280, and somebody paid it because it's not there anymore. And the used ones are going for like $80 nowadays. Yeah, and so you can download a free copy on rsr.org/HPT. You can get a digital copy of it. It's copyright 2019. It's taken 5 years, and we still don't have it in print, and that's a whole nother story. If we get time, we'll jump into that. But let's listen to Kevin Lee. He spoke at the Twin Cities Creation Science Association down at the University of Northwestern in St. Paul this summer. It was a Zoom one. And he just has great information. Oh, and by the way, on Tuesday, they have another speaker coming in. I'm going to have a table at Bethel. I'm so excited. We'll try and get a creation club going there. And so, yeah, this is what he has to say.
Because I had become a student of the hydroplate theory, I felt fully confident to communicate with Dr. Brownlee and to predict that what he would find was not what he was anticipating. I'm quoting now from his article, A Mission with Many Scientific Surprises. One of the most unexpected was the 2009 discovery of the amino acid glycine. Now, glycine it's an amino acid used by all life. How could the amino acids have been formed in the vacuum and near absolute zero temperature of space? He was shocked by this discovery. The finding that inner solar system materials formed at very high temperature were transported all the way to the edge of the solar system to the region where Pluto is one of the major scientific findings of stardust. But Dr. Brownlee can't explain how, but the hydroplate theory can say.
Yeah, that was from the Stardust mission. That is what they saw from the comets. The comets had the stuff from the Earth. And again, you can see these clips on YouTube, the Twin Cities Creation Science Association. Just going to YouTube, TCCSA, we broke them into minute clips, 5-minute highlights, and the whole talk. You can see that. Plus, we broke all the talks into their topics, like geology, astronomy, biology, miscellaneous, and even history. And then this is from the asteroid. This is what they got off an asteroid, and it boggles their mind.
Scientists were able to find out one last surprising thing: the amino acid glycine. Amino acids are the building blocks that make up proteins that are vital for all living things. Although this does not mean that there was anything alive on Cometville 2, this does lend weight to the idea that it was from comets such as this, crashing into our Earth millions of years ago, that life's first building blocks found their way to our planet, which I'm sure you all agree offers a tantalizing glimpse into our own origins.
That's a horrible deception that is a result of not being out there with a voice, as all Christian creationists, flood scientists, people with Dr. Brown's 100% consistent with the hydroplate theory, 100% consistent with science, predicting all these things that they found. If we would have had that in the classrooms of colleges and universities, this would be foolishness to everybody. Why are you saying we were seeded by stuff that formed the building blocks of life in the absolute zero temperatures, near absolute zero temperatures, and total vacuum of space, when it can't be, they can't figure out how to do these things on Earth?
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel. If we would have been banging this hydroplate drum the last 40 years, we'd have so much scientific clout. But it's being censored by evolutionists, I understand that. But it's being censored by creationists, and I really don't understand that. And even some hydroplate proponents want to keep it underneath the rug, and I really don't understand that. Well, let's listen to what he has to say. This one might be a little bit longer, but he's going to critique a NASA video, or a video on what NASA has found.
The image NASA didn't want to receive from the Deep Impact probe. What they didn't want to see is a flash of light that kept them from seeing the crater that the impactor made. And the reason why there was a flash of light that blinded the camera was because they didn't have the right perspective of what made up the Temple 1 comet. Basically, NASA is now admitting about their failures in each one of these missions and trying to put a happy face on it while they're doing so. They're talking about how they sent the impactor to the Temple 1 comet to smash into it, and they wanted to do it in a way that they would be able to see the impact and see the crater that was made on what they thought was a solid comet.
And on the 4th of July, 2005, just 1 second out from the anticipated arrival time, the impactor hit. And what a magnificent spectacle it produced. Scientists were thrilled that they had struck so accurately. This produced the bright flash you see here, the energy of which is roughly equivalent to 5 tons of TNT. This flash was much brighter than scientists expected.
Much brighter, because they thought it was solid. And what the impactor did is threw up billions of pieces of fine dust, dirt, rocks that reflected the sunlight so much that it blinded their cameras from being able to see the impact.
However, ironically, the success of the first part of the mission caused an unexpected negative side effect. A large dust cloud was kicked up by the impact, which obscured the flyby's view of the impact crater. Dust outgassed from the comet for the next 13 days, peaking 5 days in, which made it hard to see the results of this interstellar bullseye. Although it did offer some interesting insights into the internal pressures going on inside the comet. Around 5 million kilograms of water and between 10 and 25 million kilograms of dust were ejected from Temple 1 in that time.
Which they did not expect. And we got to keep in mind, this was 2005, $240 million mission that, had it not been for the space probe Stardust having enough fuel, would have been a complete waste of money, and therefore a NASA blunder.
Fortunately, scientists were able to rely on other eyes, at least to capture images of.
And those other eyes are the Stardust mission.
Back to the late 1990s, when cometary science was even more patchy. Although by this point we had sent 6 probes up to visit these enigmatic celestial bodies, not very much was known about their origins. It was believed at the time that comets were foreign visitors to our solar system, older than the Sun, having been formed from the loose pre-solar grains of dust that orbit other stars, before drifting through space towards us, only to be caught up in the Sun's gravitational pull. It was believed that this theory could be confirmed by traveling to one of these comets and picking up some of this loose dust, or stardust, that surrounds them in space. By examining the isotopic composition, scientists would be able to tell if it was unusual when compared to the dust given off by our own star.
Visual surprises. So when the Stardust space probe got to the Wild-2 comet, they were shocked and surprised. This is a $200 million project. And so then we'll see what they say about that.
But on the 2nd of January 2004, it finally arrived at its target, comet Wild-2. And what it found was immediately extraordinary. Scientists had not expected much from Wild-2. Some NASA scientists described their expectation of it to be a rather bland object looking somewhat like a black potato. However, this is not what they found.
And what they're saying is, it looks to us like they might be craters, but they're not impact craters like they would expect for something that was solid. It's a kind of impact crater you would expect for a very loosely held together rock pile that leaves a, crater impact kind of looks that are nothing like what you would hit solid. That's what they're missing here, is because they weren't expecting it to be a loosely held together rock pile.
Instead, the surface of Wild-2 was covered with spiky pinnacles hundreds of meters tall, cliffs, massive holes jetting dust and gas out into space, even on parts of the comet that were pointed away from the Sun, and thus were expected to be less reactive. In short, the surface of the comet was unexpectedly alive and self-renewing. Something else was just as notable for its absence: craters. Unlike almost every other body in our solar system with surfaces exposed to space, there were no craters on the surface of Wild-2. This puts it in stark contrast to places like Mars or our own moon. Given the period of time Wild-2 is thought to have existed, it surely must have encountered other objects which impacted with it. So where had these craters gone? It shows that the comet's surface can either be self-renewing or active,
which is only because it reforms itself after impact, because it is just a rock pile. They learned from Temple 1 too. They impacted it and didn't leave a crater, even though they're going to try and say otherwise, as we'll see. Dr. Brown wrote this to ask Dr. Brownlee why crystalline minerals, as opposed to amorphous, meaning no water, crystals form in water, as compared to minerals that form without water, which doesn't give the crystalline shape, should be found in comets. As I recall, you told me that Brownlee's response was that he didn't believe the data. See, data was already coming in that there's crystalline material being found in comets and asteroids, and he goes, I don't believe it because it's too impossible. And if crystalline materials are brought back by stardust, which they were, a good question to ask Brownlee is, how did crystalline material form in outer space? How do you get water, liquid water, to cause crystals to form in outer space? According to all theories for the origin of comets, except for the hydroplate theory, the water in comets should never have been liquid because outer space is too cold, especially where comets are thought to have been formed. And that's true, yet they have found crystalline and other minerals, clays, and other things that can only form in the presence of water, in the presence of liquid water in some cases, completely supporting the premise that they were jettisoned from the earth in the flood of Noah. And now, what did they actually find? Exactly what Walt Brown
And taking the samples back to the lab, scientists learned another completely unexpected fact about Cometville 2. It was not a visitor to our solar system at all. Unlike what had previously been believed, Cometville 2 had not originated from another star. It had been born from our own. By comparing the isotopic composition of the particles stardust collected with the samples from our own solar system, it was proven that Cometville 2 originated from the solar system.
Now think about this. It originated from the solar system. That's what they concluded. This didn't come from someplace else. It's too much like Earth. It's too much like our solar system.
And contrary to what all the ice on its surface might lead you to believe, the rock at its center was formed under white-hot conditions.
And the only explanation they're going to give for that is that somehow, that item had gotten really close to a solar nebula to get to thousands of degrees, which are chondrules. They're finding chondrules and other things that you have to get between 2,600 and 3,300 degrees. Yet, if that material was jettisoned from the pillars and the places where the crust was landing on the mantle, and it would have turned it to thousands of degrees very easily, and then jettisoned it up into space.
Chondrules and calcium aluminium inclusions were both found among the samples stardust collected. These are structures that only form under incredibly hot conditions and can be found in other asteroids between Mars and Jupiter. So scientists had to rethink their theory that comets formed in cold conditions at the edge of solar systems, even if they do spend some time there. Both fire and ice go into making comets.
Because stardust brought this material back, and the Stardust space probe that dropped the collection container back on Earth, it still had enough fuel to go back to Temple 1 to go see if it could see the crater that the copper impactor made. Okay, now what they're going to say, the circle right here, that's where they know the Temple 1 copper impactor hit. That's what they know was the location that it hit. When Stardust flew by, this is the area where the impactor hit. Now, you and I can look at that picture and say, we don't see any crater here. There's nothing there because it hit into a floating rock pile. It didn't create a crater, but they're going to say it created a crater.
The crater that had been left by Deep Impact's payload. The mission was a success. From the images Stardust took, scientists were able to calculate that it was approximately 150 meters across, so 50% larger than they were predicting. From this, they learned that the surface of Temple 1 was a very fluffy material, made from more dust than was expected, and finer in substance than a powdered snowbank. The surface was incredibly porous. In fact, they were able to estimate that 75% of the comet was actually empty space.
Now, think about that. I mean, it so loosely came together, which when you think about anything coming together in space, it without an atmosphere, it's just like impossible for a bunch of rock to decide to get together in space. But yet that's what happened. And yet it's so loosely packed, perfectly explained by the hydroplate theory, that like 75% of that was empty space.
The whole thing held loosely together by gravitational forces. From analysis of the plume that had been ejected from Temple 1 after the impact, scientists were able to identify several interesting material components, including clays, silicates, sodium, and even organic material. While not life itself, these heavily rich carbon materials may have been carried to Earth by comets in the past, providing the vital materials that make up life here. Not only that, but they were able to see other changes that had taken place on Temple 1's surface. 3 pits that had formerly existed had merged to become one. A cliff face had eroded back around 20 to 30 meters. This indicated that Temple 1's surface was a dynamically changing place, leading to interesting questions about how these formations had formed in the first place that scientists could now puzzle over.
From now until they die centuries into the future, unless they embrace the hydroplate theory. That there was at one point, all the material of this asteroid was ejected with the same velocity, the same trajectory into space with the water environment around it, water molecule environment around it that allowed it all to come together. And it is so loosely held together, it changes its look just by the changing gravitational attraction as basically as a building starts to collapse down because of the very loose forces. Your mission was a blunder. This is what this article says, which is not to say that the impact crater was obvious. I was hoping for a splashy feature around an obvious circular hole, but there was no visible splash. It was more subdued than the science team expected it to be. It took some really detailed comparisons of the old and the new pictures from Deep Impact and Stardust to confirm that there really were changes to the surface. After some judicious image processing and seeing things that aren't there, I'm going to add, you can make out an irregular shaped rim about 100 feet or 50 meters across and a mound in the middle. What that crater tells us, co-investigator Peter Schultz said, is that the surface of the comet where we hit it is weak and fragile. It's fluffy. Exactly what HPT would predict, not what any other theory can explain.
Comets are truly fascinating things, and it was thanks to the incredible work of the Stardust probe and the Deep Impact mission that we were able to learn a great deal about their inner composition and workings. While still retaining their beauty, we have pierced through their layers of enigma. We understand that they are not some foreign visitors, but originate here, from our own solar system, and may have even led to the blossoming of life itself on this planet. And it was human ingenuity and precision that allowed these discoveries to be made. So,
glory be to man is what he's saying, and yet they're completely ignoring the God elephant in the room.
All it took to learn this was to catch the dust from one and to punch another really, really hard.
If you have the wrong perspective of the past, you will have a wrong perception of the present and a wrong focus on the future. And this is what's caused the blunders. All these were conceived with the wrong idea of what they were going to get to.
So what they're expecting is not what they're finding, but with the hydroplate theory, that's perfect what the hydroplate would predict. And we'll let him go on and explain more. He can analyze this a whole lot better than me. He is as sharp as can be. That's Kevin Lee from out in Washington.
The biggest blunder to date was NASA's DART mission. And then I want you to notice as you were zooming in here, that it's a rock pile. And the closer you get, the more you see it's a rock pile. And if you've had courses in orbital physics, to think about how it's even possible, it's impossible for rocks and dust and dirt of various sizes to come together in space. It's impossible without an environment of molecules of air to slow it down. So they're getting all excited here, and we're going to get in and see, I think, this last frame. What does that look like? It looks like that is, ladies and gentlemen, that is Earth from 5,000 years ago put into space. That's what it is. And just like the Temple 1, which was years earlier, just like Temple 1, they can't find, they sent a probe to watch the impact, to see what the crater did, and it blinded that probe, so it made it unable, they don't know what happened because the same blinding happened. They repeated their ignorance of what comets and asteroids were made out of. In 2016, 6 years before impact, I wrote the physics behind a chosen plan to work for one composition of deflecting an asteroid, solid rock, but will fail if the asteroid consists of loosely held together rock pile. And then after the DART mission hit, after the day that I saw it, since DART confirmed what all HPT advocates suspected would be the case, that it's a rock pile, I thought I should take a stab at predicting what the IKEA cube cameras will show, which is a big flash, and that would cause a meteor shower, that this stuff could come and impact the Earth, even though they had promised us that this mission would have no detriment to the Earth. This is what was found when it hit. This is what the IKEA cube saw, exactly like Temple 1. Blinded the screen. They should have known that what should have happened is they should have put that camera that was following the impact, they should have put it back several days from what they learned on Temple 1. They should have had it come days and days later. But instead, it got blinded. The camera was useless. This is what was seen by Earth-based telescopes when the collision occurred. This right here is the Didymus Dimorphos asteroid, and it hits, and this is the debris field that is being ejected into space, into their orbits around the sun. And this is the comet. It left a comet tail. It left this tail of debris that showed light for days and days and days. And so then NASA came clean with the fact that the NASA asteroid deflection test accidentally creates a boulder swarm that could impact the Earth. It turns out, years later, or many, many months later, they did a computer analysis of all the debris, and it turns out that in the next several thousand years, there's not a single chance of any of that debris hitting Earth. The collision shortened the moonlet's orbit by 32 minutes, surpassing the 73 seconds, and significantly changed the asteroid's shape. The DART mission's unexpected findings served as a powerful reminder of the complex and interconnected nature of our solar system. We must remain vigilant in monitoring the consequences of our actions, the blunders of our actions, of having the wrong idea of what we're doing when we go up into space, hitting things. The reshaping of Dimorphos is completely outside of the realm of physics as we understand it, said Christina Thomas. And when I read that, I thought, it's not completely outside of the realm of physics as we understand it. That's exactly what would happen to an asteroid if you smacked it and it was made out of a bunch of rocks that were all loosely held together. You have to have the right perspective of the past of what made these things if you're going to have a redirection test. The European Space Agency cannot explain how a very loose internal structure similar to a pile of rubble that is held together by gravitational interactions and small cohesive forces. They know that's what it is, but they can't explain how it got there, how that happened.
Yeah, so their theory is wrong. They're wasting billions of dollars because their perspective of the past is wrong. And I used to be motivated I wanted this to get out there so Walt Brown would get the credit he deserved before he died. And now I'm trying to get it out there before NASA makes another blunder. We need to get this out there. We've got the proper perspective. And this next video will put we'll hammer in the coffin nail in it. It's just amazing. They can't explain this at all.
There's a strange moon of the asteroid Dinkinish. When the Lucy probe was here looking at Dinkinish, it saw this. Oh, another asteroid with a moon. And then it went a little bit further and took another angle at it. And it said, oh, it's an asteroid with a moon that is made up of two components that are contact binaries of the same size. Absolutely impossible, except for the hydroplate theory. Principal investigator for Lucy said in a statement, I would have never expected a system that looks like this. In particular, I don't understand why the two components of the satellite have similar sizes. This is going to be fun for the scientific community to figure out. No, it's not going to be fun. They're never going to figure it out unless they embrace the hydroplate theory premise of how they were sent up into space. Contact binary systems seem to be fairly common. Now there's, oh yeah, this is common to find contact binaries, which was impossible to them a few years ago until they keep finding them everywhere. But scientists hadn't seen one orbiting an asteroid prior to Dinkinish, and we never suspected anything so bizarre. Details of how this unusual moon formed remain mysterious, and it will remain mysterious until people embrace Dr. Brown's hydroplate theory. They'll never figure it out. Scientists were shocked in 1993 when for the first time they saw a moon orbiting an asteroid called Dactyl. They said it was impossible, and then they saw it. Galileo scientists correctly stated that it is virtually impossible, that the moon is a captured object, something created completely separately from light. It is impossible to catch a moon in the vacuum of space. Now, decades later, scientists have found that 17%, more than 245 asteroids have orbiting moons. And now a moon with a moon can only be explained by the hydroplate theory.
So the evidence is stacking up pretty strongly for the hydroplate theory. You know, decades ago, they didn't think an asteroid could have a moon, and now it's common. So NASA keeps finding the impossible, and they say that it's common. And then this is a surprise that NASA's asteroid rocks hints Bennu came from an ocean world. And that's what we looked at the beginning. The space rock was once part of a long-gone ocean world. And like Doug was saying, yeah, that's Earth. And it's the trickster asteroid, nicknamed as such for baffling scientists. Yeah, they just are always baffled when they find stuff because they have the wrong perspective of the past. They're forced to think in this blind chance perspective, and they're wrong all the time. It would be like if I had a chest of gold and I said, okay, you can have all the grant money and all the time in the world to find this chest of gold, but you can only look in this building. And I put it outside. You'll never find it, even though you might trip over it every morning when you come in from work or come into work. But you can't look out there. You have to look in here. And that's what's happening in science. You have to look inside this materialistic box. All there is matter and energy, and you can't see the supernatural creator, which is the only thing that really makes sense. A supernatural creator made a natural creation. And then, when you have that perspective, especially with the hydroplate theory, you can make accurate predictions. But if you reject the creator and you just put your faith in blind chance, like the Big Bang and evolution, you waste billions of dollars because you have the wrong perspective. We'll see what he has to say here.
This is an OSIRIS-REx mission, $1 billion. They designed it to come down and kind of smash onto the surface to bring up some debris that would then, as it pulled away, it would go into the collection chamber. What they found, and they had a time delay before the thrust would move it away from the Bennu asteroid. And what they found out is that time delay almost trashed $1 billion mission because it kept going down. It buried itself. That arm buried itself in the asteroid because it's a loosely held together rock pile. And it fired off just before it would have been, completely, down into the asteroid. This asteroid came from a long gone ocean world, which I say is a little presumptive considering that they and we are living on the ocean world that Bennu came from.
Yeah, he does such a great job critiquing those NASA discoveries. He's so sharp. He's way up here when he's talking about that stuff, but he understands it. He was in the Navy and he taught nuclear reactor stuff in the Navy, so he's a sharp guy. He's taken a lot of these physics classes, and he's really good at holding the NASA scientists' feet to the fire, and he's very, very, very good. And so I'm just going to show this one again, so this one might make a little more sense the second time, and then you'll understand why Doug's so excited when they find the water world.
So let me know what you think.
This is the most insane space news in a really long time. This asteroid, called Bennu, is 63 million kilometers away. That's 160 times farther than the moon is. Over the last few years, this spacecraft called OSIRIS-REx traveled all the way there, touched its surface, grabbed a sample, and brought it all the way back to Earth. And what they found in that sample is insane. It's rich in carbon, nitrogen, and organic compounds, all of which are essential to life as we know it, but we've seen that before. The asteroid is also covered in a mineral called serpentine, which looks like this. And these samples look just like the type of rock that we find here in mid-ocean ridges. This is where the stuff from the mantle of the Earth comes up and touches the water. It's underwater. Scientists think that this asteroid could be a chunk of an ancient small ocean world. This could be a piece of an old watery planet that's been traveling through space for billions of years, and we just took a sample of it.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
Wow. Oh my goodness.
We have a few minor tweaks for, first of all, that watery planet, let's call it Earth,
Oh
as
yeah.
Kevin Lee likes to say. I wanted to get your reaction, Brian, because when I saw that, I'm like, wow, she works for Walt Brown and Real Science Radio in creating a short for us without us having to do all that production effort.
Yeah, she needs a raise, I think. Man.
Well,
Yeah, and they have this saying, all scientists work for Walt Brown, because whenever they find a new discovery, it validates what Walt Brown was saying. And then Bob Enyart, he used to have an artist put Walt Brown was here on these pictures of comets and asteroids. And so, yeah, everything that they find, it validates the hydroplate theory. And so what I'm looking for, well, actually, you can see more of this talk if you want more of the details on the hydroplate. Go into YouTube, it's Solidify Your Faith, and we got different playlists, one's for church, school, colleges, but one specific to the hydroplate. And that's the one that somebody actually shared with somebody. How did that go? I got an email from somebody saying that they'd been praying for their friend. They were praying that intelligent Christian men would come into the store and buy stuff and share some creation information with them. And she said that you've been an answer to prayer. And she said, I think they've been watching your video. He's been watching your videos because he sent one to me. And I said, well, I'm flattered. Thank you. It's very encouraging to hear that. But I got about 100 or 200 videos out there. I thought, which video did he send you? And it was probably my worst audio video out there. It was I had 20 minutes to speak to the Rotary Club over in Sauk Rapids. Yeah, and it was during COVID, so it's in a restaurant and the doors are open. The doors are gone, so you have all this background noise from the restaurant. And I tried to clean it up, with digitally, and it just messed it up. But that's the one that he sent to her. And it was the hydroplate in 15 minutes. You can see that on my YouTube channel. And it occurred to me, it's not how flashy the video it is, it's the content of the video that matters. So a lot of my stuff, it's not Answers in Genesis quality, but it's information. And so, yeah, the hydroplate, it answers a lot of questions. I really enjoy talking to college students about it because the professors don't care. They were taught to think a certain way and they don't want to see something new. And sometimes science progresses one funeral at a time. And I saw that happen with Harlan Brentz. He's the guy who said the scablands came from a big flood, and that went against uniformitarianism, which was all that was allowed decades ago. And then they finally got the satellite pictures and said, you know what, this was made by a big flood. And then, but they gave him the award when he was like in his 90s. And he had outlived all the ones that he wanted to rub their nose in it. So again, science progresses sometimes one funeral at a time. And I've seen it in my lifetime because this hydroplate used to be the redheaded stepchild. Nobody would talk about it, any of the creation organizations. But now, Dr. Galuzza is running ICR. And he invited Kevin Lee to come in and present the hydroplate. And it was very well received. He said, I want to see what the hydroplate people have to say, not what people say about the hydroplate people. And so there's a crack in the censorship. And I was able to thank him a year or two at Harris. He came and spoke in Minnesota. And I thanked him for allowing the hydroplate people to speak. And he said, the hydroplate's been marginalized for far too long. And so we just need to get this into the mainstream. YouTube, you can check that out. I've got some talks that are censored on YouTube. So I've got a Rumble channel, three of them. And if you want to check those out, it's solidifyyourfaith.weebly.com. And my brother asked, well, what does Weebly stand for? And I said, it means I'm cheap. It's a free website. I don't want to give any more money out than I have to, but those are some of the resources you can go to. And again, the hydroplate theory, we need, there's an entrenched way of thinking right now in our government. Schools, museums, and media, even secular journals, even Baylor, for crying out loud. They're teaching evolution, blind chance perspective, and that's entrenched, and it's hard to change that when it's got so much support from the government and schools and churches and the intellectuals, the elites. But you know what it is? It's like that story, the boy who said the emperor has no clothes. They say you just don't understand evolution or the Big Bang. You're not intelligent enough. It's like, no, there's no evidence for it all. We just need enough people to say, hey, there's no evidence for that. The emperor has no clothes. So when you have the big forces, they don't want things to change because they've got the power. But if a vast number of people realize we've been misled, like check out those errors on the textbook over there on that table, when a vast number of people realize we've been misled, they lose their power because we're not going to fund it anymore. And so that's kind of what I've been trying to do, to get a vast number of people, and I need your help. Let's get this snowball rolling. Let's get informed and inform others. Okay, and so with that, I think, we've got done a little early, which is good. So thank you so much for your attention. I do appreciate that. Let's see, does anybody have any questions? We covered a lot. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
One of the previous meetings, you had a book about the hydroplate theory that you told about.
Yeah.
Available still? Can anybody get that if they want it?
You can get the download for free, and it's on rsr.org. That's Real Science Radio. rsr.org/HPT. You're going to see a picture of that book, and then right underneath that picture, you're going to see the 9th edition, and you click that button, and you can download it. And somebody, Ellen, she took that PDF that's 600 pages, the 9th edition. This one's 300. And she readjusted the margin on every page, and she submitted it to her publisher, and her publisher printed it out. It's probably the rarest book in the world. There's maybe a couple of dozen of them, and she sent me a few of them. And she made this video. She said, hey guys, you've been working on this, trying to get this into print for 5 years. She didn't say that, but that's what's been happening. She said, hey guys, I got this book printed, and she folded it out and she showed them, and it looked really nice, really high quality. And she said it's one click away from being available worldwide. And I was so excited. And I just started emailing the chain. It's like, great job, Ellen. I can't wait for this to get into the mainstream, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But the people in charge, their silence was deafening. And after a day and a half, they finally said, thanks, Ellen, but no thanks. We don't want it to go worldwide right now. It's like, well, why not? And they said, because there might be typos in it. And we said, well, just put proofreading copy on it and get it out there, and we'll have more proofreaders. It'll be faster that way. And they said, no, they want the 9th edition to be perfect. And I said, well, make the 10th edition perfect. Make this the 9th edition so the information gets out there. And they still say no. And I think there was a formula that might have been wrong too. But you could just put that on the cover. It's like the formula is wrong here. Watch out for this page. But get the information out there. So not only are secularists censoring this, and the big major creation organizations censoring this, even there's people inside the Hydroplate Club that are censoring it. There's no other way to say it. So again, you can get the email one, or you can get the digital one for free. And that one's kind of nice too, because you can push Command F and type in comets, and you'll get wherever it talks about comets. But there is something about having a book, going through the book, because you can go hydroplate surfing, because you go and reading and you cross references somewhere, so you jump over there and start reading, and you jump over there. It is so much fun. He's got it all figured out. And the new one, what's in the 9th edition instead of the 8th, is the origin of radioactivity. And so you can go into Brian Nichols' YouTube channel for that, Brian Nichol, and then origin of radioactivity. Because Walt Brown says, is it very good to have radioactive material that can cause birth defects, like uranium? Is that very good? And then he thought that the radioactivity was formed during the flood, as those water was shooting up and the granite was bouncing up and down, because when you stretch or compress granite, it'll make a spark. So you can have lightning in there, kind of like you have lightning out there. You get this plasma going, and it'll slam all these materials together and get super heavy elements that decompose or decay until the valley of stability. But that's where you get the uranium from. Because if uranium came from outer space, it'd be all through the Earth, and it's not. There's hardly any in the ocean. I don't think there's any in the ocean, but it's mainly on land, mainly by granite. And so that's the new thing about the hydroplate theory. And he also says that you can predict earthquakes because of this this charge in the granite. It messes up the ionosphere, and you can tell when there's going to be an earthquake. And for them to censor this, it really bothers me. So I need help shining the light on this.